This last session of the day, we're joined by some of my favorite people in the world as well. So we're going to be talking about how to design the new hybrid working experience for everyone. We're joined by Annette Bohm, who's a member of the executive committee and chief HR officer at bpost. We get Szapar, who's a remote hybrid work advocate, co-founder and CEO at RemoteHow. Judith, you're back for like the fourth, fifth time now. I love it. Like the dedication. You're the best. Chief HR officer at Beckers Group, and my good friend Matt Burns, founder and CEO at BentoHR. Welcome everyone. How are you all?
Thank you. Fine.
Fantastic. Really Thank you for joining us.
Amazing. Fantastic and hot.
And hot.
Berlin. Yeah, yes.
I like we complain when it's cold. We complain when it's can't win, right? I thought only the people in the UK complained every time they were hot or cold, but it's not just the UK. Okay.
We adapt to you, you know.
No. Is that what it is? All right. Fair enough. Well, let's just jump straight in. Hybrid work has put an enormous amount of pressure on all leaders in the business, but especially middle managers who carry sort of the biggest burden of this. How are you supporting them to become effective hybrid leaders? We'll pick on you first, Judith.
Okay, thanks. And I'm always joking if I hear the term middle managers, because we love to bash them, and I think they are quite in a tough position, in a sandwich position. So what I did, and I think we decided that a little bit shortly before COVID, that I want to democratize leadership development. And I think that was working very well, because you're right. Everybody kind of has this magnifying lens on them. And now the expectation that has been risen already in the past is even higher. And I think this hybrid world brings another layer where we have some special challenges. And what I like to do is design this leadership journey with lots of impulses, small practical hints, and little learning bites for our managers, and we try to put it on data out of mostly of our engagement survey, and we found out that feedback is super important, and we could improve on that. So we introduced, actually beginning of COVID, virtually a quarterly conversation, and we trained our managers to give better feedback and also work on their coaching skills. Conflict management, probably we will talk about it later, even a bit deeper. I observe, and I also saw it in the engagement survey, that conflict is actually a topic that is getting bigger, and probably if you have a conflict, it's blowing up bigger. So we try to really explain that and also work on quite good old tools, actually, preference of communication types. Yeah, there's differences in preferences. So we try to work on that. Mental health, I know that's also your favorite topic, right? And that's also for sure the understanding, the stress level. I have crazy data. We did a pilot in one country where we did a kind of proactive survey with our employees, and 45% of the organization was an Asian country with a very tough lockdown, but I still think it's representative of other countries. So we saw 45% of our employees had higher levels of anxiety, stress. So we really put some measures in for the individuals, but we also train leaders to understand this topic a little bit better. And then very practically, also again, out of the engagement survey, we saw that team efficiency, exactly this hybrid thing again. Well, as you know, we are a production company, so we have a lot of people that are still working in shifts, and we have also some more flexible solutions that we were experimenting during COVID, and we also keep at a kind of, not crazy level, the level that Ivo is pushing, probably because that does not fit to us. But team efficiency, also working with some very simple tools like Kanban boards, for example. We are also still need to educate our organization on that. And last but not least, next week, and I think maybe you think it's boring, but we have a new presentation course, especially in this new world, because communication is so important, right? So we are training our leaders on a very intensive course, and I pilot this next week as a complete new format. And yeah, I'm curious how it goes, but I really like it. So we do a lot of, but really, small bites, different angles, different impulses on a continuous journey.
Love that. And would you say that training piece you mentioned earlier about conflict, is it the lack of communication, which is why you're doing that communication piece, causing conflict?
Well, I like, there is one angle to that. I think in an engineering company, we are probably not the most natural communicators, right? That's probably quite a cliche even situation. I want to train leaders to be more comfortable to stand in front of their team or do, bigger meetings and really have a cool, engaging speech with them. And then I also want to work on really individual coaching situations or really solving a conflict. So it's multi-layered, actually.
Yeah. No, love that. Well, clearly it's great that you're investing in your leaders and supporting your managers as well. So that's great to hear. Annette, I know
if you allow me, I can perhaps step in with regard to the conflict management, because in fact, what we have seen is the big challenge is that the managers are now sitting in meetings all day long, and they do not even grasp anymore when there's a conflict in the team. Yeah, because in fact, they are running from one team's meeting to the next one. And this is also where our managers asked us for help, because they said normally in the office, if there is a real conflict happening at the work floor, I think you pick it up even when you're in a meeting. Somebody dares to come into your office and to just say, like, perhaps you should be aware there's something going on the work floor. But you do not even grasp this anymore because you are in meetings. You always put on your do not disturb. So in fact, I think this was one of the discussions that we had with our leaders. And in fact, Judith was saying, like, we are bashing on the heads of the middle managers. I think there are some companies where the middle managers then bash back to the HR department and say, like, come up and with some ideas, tools in order to help us so that we can manage the situations better. Yeah. And if I build on this one, I think with regard to conflict, we then gave them also some ideas on how to grasp the conflict and to also take the right to step out of a Teams meeting, which I think a lot of people think they cannot do, which I find strange because they did it when they were on the work floor. But in fact, this was one thing that came up with us. The other one, I think Judith talked about it a little bit as well, is this high pressure on the managers when it comes to delivering results. They need to deliver the same results with their teams than before. But in fact, employees have become much more outspoken. They refuse to be controlled. So in fact, we also organize sessions on how can you create productivity without really applying a control and demand style. How do you go into interaction with your teams? How do you plan your work up front and make sure that you have an informal conversation where you also get information, but you do not come across as the control and demand person. I think that was one that we figured out was very important for us. And I think a third one for us was as well psychological safety, that people said, and I think it comes also back to the well-being aspect, that people said we feel a little bit less comfortable in raising our voice on Teams. But in fact, I think this brought us also back in our company to say, like, okay, not everything should be done by Teams, and we still need connection moments, and we need people to still come to the office in order to have these more informal discussions also in the office.
Yeah. If if I may chime in with two huge changes as that we need to equip with managers and in general how we work, it's called asynchronous work. I don't know how familiar our audience is with asynchronous work, asynchronous communication, but in a nutshell, and we are not expecting an answer immediately. We're not expecting to be all day on meetings. It's becoming more asynchronous. We are in control of our time, of our team. But the key here is that these roles need to be defined. So when we're talking about the pain points and how managers are complaining, and rightfully, that all days they're on meetings and they cannot get any work done, they cannot properly manage. That's because companies copy and pasted the behaviors from the offline world, from the office world, into the new scenario, right? So one of the biggest things, how we and our experts are helping companies, is to help them transition from a very synchronous and meeting-oriented culture of ad hoc calls and unorganized meetings and typing messages on Slack, on Microsoft Teams, and expecting answer 24 hours a day, to be more asynchronous, to define how you're communicating, define how you're working, define expectations on other end. And that's actually also tied to the feedback, the conflicts. Like in many cases, the conflict arises because the expectations are not aligned. Like, I thought that you will answer to me, but you didn't, right? If there is a code that for specific types of messages, you have 1 hour to respond. For others, you have 8 hours because it's about the workshop that is happening in 2 weeks, and you don't need to interrupt me immediately, right? And these kind of use cases, like, there's more and more. So one big topic is asynchronous work, asynchronous communication, that will immediately help improve not just productivity, but also well-being and in general processes within the company. Then the second aspect, which is purely connected with this, is to help managers create their own playbooks of how they work, like their ways of working. So we know these big, giant playbooks from the HR side where everything is described, and this is amazing. But unfortunately, in many cases, it just stays on the HR side of the building. And on the manager side, it's just chaos, right? So what we see, what companies start to do more and more, is to help managers build these ways of working, but the ways of working, they're very specific to their department, to their team. So you're taking the big template, let's say coming from HR. Some companies are even hiring head of remote, or like temporarily getting the experts on board. They're helping to create it. This is, of course, a living document. So you're notifying this once and then forget about it. No, you constantly improve this playbook. You constantly give support to your managers. And this is the only way how you can, one, get feedback from the team, from them, how to do it, and then improve things based on this feedback. And maybe last super small thing relating also to what has been said before, radical candor. So the way how we're talking with each other, we are very honest, but of course nice. This is aside from trust and transparency that should exist anyhow before pandemic, before remote work came to mainstream, that needs to really happen. We need to be open with each other, because there's no other way how we'll improve things. We are learning, like before the panel started, we've been talking about that we are learning all the time. And this is exactly the moment that we need to be honest and learn.
I love that.
I love that we're starting here because, Chris, as you know, we did focus groups at BentoHR over the last couple of years with like close to 1,000 business leaders. Yeah. And the number one issue that we heard was, how do we help support middle managers better? If anyone's worked in a large or medium-sized organization, you understand the inherent conflict these roles have. In a lot of cases, they're individual contributors. They're also leaders, and they're also culture carriers. We've talked about employee sentiment, employee engagement. The impact that a middle manager has on things like employee attrition or sentiment or productivity is absolutely massive. And when we talk about how we affect change going forward, we have to look at the tools that we're providing these individuals to have success. So it's good for us to say, you need to do things differently. You need to change the way you look at the world and how you lead and manage. But absent of the tools to actually reinforce that, when I say tools, I mean, yes, playbooks. I also mean technology. I mean, data. I mean, providing these individuals with a fighting chance to be able to manage a remote, dispersed, asynchronous team, which is not an easy thing to do, particularly when we're dealing against the backdrop of a global pandemic where we don't have a lot of information. Our businesses' security and financial health may be in jeopardy. And we have to be realistic about what we're asking these individuals. So for me, change management plays a critical role in taking these individuals through this journey and giving them license to learn, but also to make mistakes along the way and to be transparent with them along with their employee bases so that they understand that we're on a journey together that's ultimately in service to the entire collective organization. So for us, I think it's a really interesting question. And I think it's a great place to start today's conversation.
I needed to smile when Ivo said radical candor, which I love. I love the book and I love the concept. But I can tell you, when we introduced the feedback culture in all countries, in Asia, in one country, they I think they wanted to hide, and they had the immediate reaction: okay, feedback. This is not the culture here. But actually. I can relate. We lived in Vietnam for almost 2 years. Exactly. That's exactly. The cool thing is when we really said, no, let's test it and let's give it a try. Actually, they are now the ones that are most disciplined in those talks after some irritation or something. I completely agree, Matt, with you that it's a big thing and we have big expectations, and we need to really also realize that we need to have more compassion also with our middle managers. On the other hand, I think it's also, it's the playbook, but I don't think I'm a big expert in hybrid, but I have now worked in for 8 years, I think 4 years or 6 years in Danone, managing international virtual teams. And here at Beckers already from the beginning, 4 years ago, because my global team, for example, they are all over the world. Only 2 colleagues are here with me in Berlin. And I would not call it playbook. I would call it rituals. We have rituals. And I think that is super important for us. And, I did not really study it. I just tried what is working. But I completely relate what Ivo, you have much nicer words for that. But, we start on Monday mornings with a weekly of the team. That's our ritual. And I stole this idea from the $1 Trillion Coach, book where, and another one that we start always with feeling our feelings. How do you feel? So everybody is commenting on that, and everybody is commenting what they did, cool stuff or not so cool stuff on the weekend. And that is bonding. And I can tell you some team members, they were really irritated. And that's why I think, Matt, we need to guide our leaders, because especially the rational types, they think it's a waste of time. What's going on? We need to deliver the results. Why should I have this strange, investment of time? But actually, even the most rational person now in my team that was really telling me, we are losing a lot of time with it. Now, after some time, he actually understands it's a bonding moment for the team, and it's super important. We also have a Kanban board. We were experimenting with some tools. Now we have it in Microsoft even. It's super easy. We look at it regularly, and that's why I think we get to results, because we have a clear overview and we are following it up, and everybody knows exactly where everybody is standing. I think that's so super important. And I don't know if it's very basic, but at least in Beckers, we see that not every manager is aware of those. I have a weekly with every direct report weekly. I used to do longer intervals. Now I do it weekly for sure. We have more strategic workshops where we really focus on fun, on team investment, really. We are experimenting something, and we also work on the strategic topics. And we also do some small things. And I think there's also the small things, maybe it's too basic, but we had some people in some critical moments. And then we use actually our new cool tools to do videos And I know that was making, so for example, one colleague in the HR community, her son had a car accident. And then we took the weekly and we recorded a message to her and sent it to her. And that was really making an impact, to really humanize everything. So that's, and the last thing I also would say, because you mentioned the tools, I really, I don't want to be dominated by the tools. For example, for my HR community call, the international one, it's a monthly. That's also very important that everybody comes together. I use Zoom. Normally we use Teams, but I don't like Teams because I have tiny faces. I cannot comment on the impression of the faces. I really, I think we need to look at those details and really see what is working for us to yes. And now I need to shut up. Yeah, I think Chris is
it's fine.
Frustrated.
I told you we have to find out when Judith stops breathing, then we can get in there. No, I'm only joking, Judith. And now I'd be interested to hear from you, because the company you previously worked for was already working hybrid before, right?
Yes, that's right.
Was there been a big change in the way that they, or what you've seen, the way that you operated before then to now everyone's kind of moved to this hybrid working model, or did you see pretty much the same?
Yeah, so in fact, before joining bpost, I was working for the bank and insurance company, and we already had 2 days of home working for the people being based in the headquarters. We did not have it for the people working in the retail offices. So in fact, I think the biggest impact of COVID was for the people in the retail offices, because they experienced for the first time home working and they loved it. Yeah. So in fact, when we had to decide how we would go back to work, we also decided that we should align a little bit more between the retail network and the headquarters, which was very much appreciated in the retail network, because in fact they got the opportunity to also work from home. But we were surprised to see that the people in the headquarters were not really happy, because in fact we already had 2 days and we wanted in the beginning to only start with 2 days. In the meantime, the bank and insurance has brought it back to 2.5 to 3 days at home. But based on the pressure of the employees, because in fact they said we are not best in class anymore. We were best in class with 2 days. So in fact, you feel very clearly the pressure of employees who experience something as very positive, but then cannot get enough of it. So in fact, at a certain point in time, we felt also obliged to bring the CEO in and to have him give a message. And the message that he gave was that we were not really trying to penalize people by not allowing them to stay 5 days a week at home, but that we found connection very important for building a culture and maintaining a culture. And I think this really was something that we had to explain well, because I think a lot of people felt tempted to see it rather like a punishment than a real motivation to come back to the office. I think in the meantime, this has changed. We also did what Judith was saying. We did quite a lot of engagement surveys in order to measure for whom it was difficult to come back to the office. And we were surprised to see that we had the 55-year and older who find it really difficult to come back to work. And to be honest, having reflected upon it, I fully understand. The 55-year-olds, they normally have already been in their jobs for a while. They like their jobs, but they know them in and out. They do not really see a lot of career perspectives anymore. And they go like, okay, I know my job. I can do it from home, and I can do it from home as well as I can do it in the office. So what we try to do then is to really talk to the 55-year and older, and to give them a new role, the role of the coaches to the newcomers in the organization. This was really needed. And I think we should talk about onboarding as well. What we have seen, it's especially difficult for the new people in the company to really make sure that they get into the company culture and understand the company culture, and the things that are not in manuals, but that they happen and experience at the work floor. And especially young people told us that if they do not get the proper onboarding, that the likelihood that they will stay with the company is pretty low. And we have seen it. We have seen people leaving again. It is really interesting. The younger generation, at least in the company I work for, and I see it again in the company I'm working for now, they want to be at the work floor because they think that they still have to learn a lot. And they think it's easier to learn on the work floor. And what I found also quite interesting, what they told me is that they said, look, how we work at university. We never study alone. We always study in group. We love to be in group. We love to see our colleagues, and we do not want to be at home. So I think this is a little bit where I come from.
Yeah.
If I may chime in on mandating number of days and reasons why people should go back to the office, we see a humongous backlash among employees of our clients or companies that are coming to us to help, because in many cases it's really hard to defend the artificial number of days. So there is a trap that many companies already have in place, like companies like Apple, etc. They started to mandate stuff and then they pedaled back because they see that people want to have a choice. Like for the last 2 years, they've been working remotely. Now, for the past months, they can have a choice. And now someone is saying, no, you need to be here. And it's really hard to find these arguments why. So what we see, like the shift that is happening, and this is really tied to how leaders see it, like how management see it, like boards, that companies start to give a choice. We keep offices. You will still meet in offices for offline events. If you want to organize a workshop there, come. There is a space. If you want to do it hybrids, some people are here and there, you can totally do it. So if we see this hat of personalized experience, personalized employee experience, this is exactly what it comes to place, right? It starts with this, like, I have a freedom where to work. You should not care where I work. You should care about the outcome of my work, the fact that I'm happy or not. And then if something is broken along those lines, then you should intervene. But we still see, unfortunately, mostly in companies that were not super remote friendly before pandemic, that there is this tendency of trying to come back to the old world with all the legacy there. So there is a risk. I'm not saying that offices are gone or we should not eat there or like work there at all, but there should be a choice. And right now there's this fight going on, and I'm really curious how the recession will impact this. But just a warning from what we see with our clients, large, big, small, medium, scale-up startups, give people a choice because otherwise it will be a problem.
If I may, I would want to argue that I do not fully agree. Yeah, because in fact, I think a company is a community and a community of people, and it's like a family. Yeah, if everybody in the family does what he wants, the family stops existing. Yeah, I fully agree with you that it should not be rules that should be given by the top. Yeah, but I think there should be discussions in the team about how much cohesion and how much connection is needed. Yeah, because in fact, what we've seen when we raised the question, 1 out of 5 employees said, I would want to never come back to the office. And to be honest, this does not work like this. If you are a team member and the others want you to be there, you have also to show some respect to the other team members. You might not have the need to see them, but they might have a need to see them. And I think you need to find a balance. I would also agree with you that it should not come from the top, but I think at least team members should talk about how much closeness is required.
Yes, I fully agree that on the team level that should happen. Just two small things about these 20% of people. There were companies that were, and like right now you have more and more companies that are fully remote, so they never seen each other in person and they work and they grow. And you have examples like GitLab, Automatic, the company behind WordPress, thousands of employees, fully remote, no office, right? It doesn't mean that they don't see each other for some offline events, for bonding, etc. No, but they're able to do it. So the question from the business side, and actually I had a very interesting discussion today about it, what you can do with these 20% of people that don't want to do it, like you can lose them. So then immediate impact on talent attraction, talent retention, but potentially attraction as well if the word goes out, right? So it's like it's a very tricky. What we unfortunately see, why the reason to come back is that the managers want to be still in control. And this is the main driver, like not the lack of trust is pushing this to come back to the old world, and not rational reasons behind it. And I'm not saying that there are none, right?
Yeah. I had this conversation recently with my team, and the problem is there has to be some give and take. It can't be your way, your way or the highway on both sides of the party. And we now meet every Monday as a team. And I had a few employees who said, I don't want to come in. I want to work full-time from home. My first reaction was frustration and annoyed because everyone else, apart from those two people, didn't want to come in. Then I realized before I get frustrated, I need to understand what is the driver? Why is this individual feeling this way? And in actual fact, when I sat down with them, yes, they said, I don't want to come in. But when I explained the value that the team would love you to be there to hear your insights and hear your perspectives and connect with you and build that, they were like, oh, okay, if that's the case, I'll come in. I'm happy to come in. When it was just me saying, I want you in on Monday, there's not a reason for someone to come in as well. And I'm happy to say that those people love coming in on Mondays now, because they understand the value of coming to connect with the team and building the bonds and the work that gets done. And I think many companies just don't explain that. So those people that we're talking about to say, I don't want to come back, of course they don't. They've been working remotely for 2 years. They've got better work-life balance, probably. They're going to get to go for a walk at lunch. And now you're telling them they need to come back. Why? It cannot be just because.
And I agree with you. And I think we have many opportunities to making the coming back experience more pleasant. Yeah. So in fact, what we see, also many of the 20% who said that they would not want to come back and have in the meantime come back like it. Because in fact, I think we spend the time in the office differently from how we spent it before. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in fact, we really make sure that people connect, that people talk to each other, that they are creative, and that they also can grab a coffee. To be honest, what I experienced is the strengths of having a coffee bar, of having pleasant places to sit at, to have some food, because this is what people tell us. They like, especially the social contacts with their peers when they come in.
Yeah, I would also support that. And I think it's how we explain it and what is behind it. Yeah. And people are probably smarter to understand the real reason. And I agree with you, Ivo. If it's just about, okay, this is my rules, I had it before, I'm happy to go back to my old rules or something, that is not accepted anymore. But if we really differentiate between coordinated work, where you can really go on, do your task on your own, and it's actually better that you have some privacy or whatever, and freedom how to self-organize, but then also the collaborative part. And I think we all agree also that for innovation, we need those moments. I just organized a global workshop on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I really asked very busy colleagues, but everybody wanted to be there. Yeah, so nobody had really some I don't know, reasons to not come. I think, we need to create those really good moments where the energy is high, and it needs to be a reason for that. And I also face the reality, Ivo, that the operators in the production sites, they will also, we cannot have. I'm actually, in all of my HR processes, I always challenge: can I do the same for everybody? Can I include everybody in the process? I really hate this idea to have a happy few and they get everything. And then we have some workers that, we don't do anything for them. So I try to democratize and to equalize as much as possible. And then I don't want to create this notion of a two-class society where, there's some that are completely free-floating, and then there's some that are very strict shift system. So, and I think also there's a reason. People are different. Some really like structure. Some like to separate things. They are completely overwhelmed, right? To self-organize. And we should not be, I think we should not be so ideological about it. We need to listen much more, I think, to our colleagues and not pretend we know what they need. On the other hand, we also need to sometimes protect some people from what they want, because also we know this loneliness trend and isolation also that is quite common in this society.
Every chat we've had with an organization, and there's been dozens, is this passionate every single time. It doesn't matter if you're 1,000 people and you're working in manufacturing, or if you're 30,000 people working in retail, or a technology company of 200 people. These conversations are inherently very personal because they wrap in not just the business implications, but as you mentioned, Chris, the personal implications. There could be childcare considerations. There could be elder care considerations. There could be transit and getting to and from work considerations. There's a whole bunch of things wrapped into this discussion that make it more complex. What we did was essentially what Anette spoke to was we tried to find balance for organizations and help them define for themselves what made sense. And we developed criteria like proximity to decision-making, or the percentage of collaborative work, or we would spend time to understand role by role what made sense for the individuals in this particular role. So no surprise, an individual in accounts payable, for example, required less time in the office than perhaps somebody on the strategy team. And we would work with organizations to figure out what made sense. And we'd work with the employees in those groups to ask what made sense. And along the way, we would surface incongruencies. We talked to the managers that were very old school who said, I want to be able to hold court 5 days a week and be able to have my employees at arm's length. We met other managers who were like, I want to be completely dispersed. I don't want to be in the office myself, so my employees can be completely separate too, and everything in between. And by defining it by role and having those conversations, we triggered conversation, Chris, which is what you mentioned. That was so helpful, so useful. And then we created clarity by role, and we created ranges by role. So some individuals who were more biased towards coming to the office, you can come to the office as much as you want. But we did have some compressions around things like office space, because there was contraction in some situations around physical office space. And other individuals may want to be more remote more frequently. So by providing ranges, by providing guidelines, we addressed issues around fairness, equity, transparency, and to Ivo's previous point, talent acquisition, because they could be clear when they posted a role, this is the role, this is the hybrid work rating, and this is the expectation around in the office versus remote. And that addressed some significant concerns, because I think one thing we haven't talked about is before all of this was a giant bait and switch game. And this was subjective, and this was subject to nepotism. So there were people who had sweetheart deals, who operated with a different set of rules than other people. This was what it was before the pandemic. And I think getting to a place where we have congruency and alignment and transparency, it's a hard path to get there, but you can get there because, to Ivo's earlier point, you have companies like Basecamp that have been remote since the beginning. And you have other organizations that their culture really is defined around in-person interactions. It's not right or wrong. It's about being clear. It's about being transparent and letting people self-select what makes sense for them, leaders and employees.
Yeah. I've never really sat down with an employee and had a one-on-one conversation in that tone and not come out with at least some better understanding or because I think it's the frustration comes from when employees just don't feel like they're being listened to or even considered in their decision-making. And it's kind of, it's just being done to them. I always pick on my wife's company, but I'm going to pick on them again. She worked remote for 2 years and it really improved our family life with our daughter who's 3. and she has a job where she doesn't even meet with team members. She sits on a computer, and she only needs a laptop. And then to be told, just sent an email saying you have to now be in 2 days a week with no rationale whatsoever. And when she turns up to the office on those 2 days, no one's even there. She's literally just going in to sit on her own. And it's crazy. and if she now wants to work remote full time, she has to go in front of a group of people, a council of people, and convince them why she should, even though it's already been successfully happening for 2 years. And this is not, this is we've all got friends, family members, I'm sure, that are now in similar positions. And what I'm realizing is most of the people that are making this decision at the top are very disconnected. They're very disconnected to the rest of the organization. They're kind of coming at it from their point of view, of their lens, and not seeing the wider scope. So what a surprise. People just want to be listened to and valued and included in the process. And by the way, it might change. These things aren't binary. We may say, oh, this is what we want to do, and go, actually, 3 months down the line, I do want to spend more time in the office, or actually, I'm at a different life stage to where I was before. And that's where it should be. It shouldn't be binary. We need to be moving from policies to principles that we have, and trust our leaders and to make decisions.
Can I ask a question to Ivo? Because I like the point of Anette, and I discussed it a lot with junior guys coming in after graduation. There is this observing element that they had, for example, I had in my first job. I was really listening, always spying on my colleague, how he does it. And I stole a lot of, good practices when he did some telephone calls. So Ivo, how do you do that in a fully remote, and how do you onboard in the best way? I think that would be super interesting.
Yes. So maybe I will start with an answer that before pandemic, most roles for remote jobs were not junior. So before pandemic, everyone knew that this is harder. So let's just simply start with mid and then seniors, right? But then on the other side, you started to have more and more virtual internships. And then because of pandemic, like everyone needed to start. So companies started to look how to make this work, right? Couple of things. One, we see a huge success if the manager or the supervisor has a defined time on mentoring, coaching, and really spending time with this person, like even on the workflow, not but just showing some documents, but like really working and having this predefined, because otherwise there's always tons of stuff happening and there's always some priority, and this new team member, they will make it somehow, or they will quit, like the worst case scenario, right? So intentionality and really defining the time from the supervisor. Then the second thing that is really related to the company culture, and it was already discussed today, honesty, transparency, and trust. Like if the new person coming in, something is not working, the onboarding process is broken, or they simply don't know how to do something, they're not afraid to ask, or they're not afraid to comment that something is maybe not perfect and we should improve it, right? So a lot of the things that we can do are tied to the bigger picture and getting rid of the legacy that exists within the company. And this is totally not connected with remote, hybrid, whatever. This is just simply the acknowledgement that we have a lot of challenges, and now they're reflected in, for example, onboarding junior employees, right? So it's a very complex answer how to make it work. But maybe the second actionable item, what we see that companies are doing, they're organizing sort of internal boot camps run in cohorts. So right now cohorts are more for some kind of learning and development programs, but they're also running cohorts for onboarding people for juniors. They're kind of like a small academy with special tracks, but it's less about teaching them on a specific topic, but really creating this long-term onboarding and work experience together with their peers. And maybe lastly, absolutely, we should still have the opportunity to meet in person. That, of course, impacts the budget and the travel. But for companies that really want to create this offline online experience, I've mentioned previously head of remote. More and more companies hire head of community, the head of previous head of happiness, etc. So what we see, and this is, I guess, like a closure from my side that was also tied to the playbook, etc., that the more intentionally we work, and then the more intentionally we change stuff, and we know that it will take time and years and then like months and blood and tears, the better. And that requires the ownership. Like, I will repeat this many times, because we see that in the companies, there are so many different departments involved, so many different people, but there is a lack of coordination. And I'm happy to connect offline to dive deeper into the topic of juniors, because it's a big one.
I think the point you mentioned about cohorts is so important. I've seen companies have huge success with that, because you build, they want to have a community and, and feel connected, and, they're building those relationships, and there's so much benefit to the business, cross-functionally, innovation, the organizational network analysis piece is a huge piece that companies are working on now, and having those colleagues join, and having people for finance, operations, marketing, production, and building that connective tissue early on, amazing. To be able to do that, because how often have we all worked in companies where you've got someone who works 3 floors above you and you never met them, but you've both been there for 10 years as well. So things like that, we have to be very intentional about, going back to our point earlier, because it's not going to happen. You're not going to bump into each other in the hallway, or bump into each other on a Zoom call as well. So I love that. But before I let you go, parting piece of advice. We've covered so much. So for everyone listening, kind of what's one thing that you want them to take away from the call? We'll start with yourself, Judith.
Define rituals for your team. I would say that would be my advice. Mine
would be to really pay close attention to your middle managers, and to make it also attractive for them to stay middle managers, because my worry is that we will end up with more middle managers choosing a career path as an individual contributor, as the pressure for them becomes too high if we do not support them well.
I would say asynchronous work. This is probably the biggest change in how we are working, how we are communicating with each other. And we're so used to working in a synchronous way that to the point of habits, like it requires a lot of new habits, and we need to be open to hear potentially harsh feedback if we don't follow the rules, if we constantly organize meetings that are unorganized, and we constantly message people and respect to get answers immediately, etc. So I would say asynchronous work. If this is the first time that people listening to us hear it, go deeper into this topic. It will not just optimize how you're working, but it will have a tremendous impact on your private life. There will be no more situations when you're watching Netflix at 9 p.m. and your boss is messaging and expecting you to answer. So there are a lot of perks there as well.
In a society with a strong bias for action, take the time to understand your current state, where you want to go as an organization, and the path that you're going to get between the two. A lot of organizations blow by this question in service to doing actions and to achieve a result that a few people have decided. But I think we've established very clearly through this conversation, you need to take the time, you need to engage your colleagues, engage your teams, and move more slowly so that you don't have to go back and redo things. That's how you lose credibility. It's how you drive turnover. And ultimately, it's how you break cultures.